Welcome to another edition of Mastering the Math of Business with Millennium. As I was filling up my tank with gas today, paying nearly $5 a gallon, it got me thinking about these difficult times we're living in and how they will impact small business owners. And as I was just pondering and reflecting on this, it got me to think about an important ratio, and that is the debt ratio. The debt ratio is a gauge of how much liquidity exists in a business. In other words, are there sufficient enough assets that if the business was to close, are there sufficient enough assets that could be sold off to cover the liabilities? This is a solvency ratio, and it's a measure of how much risk is in a business. And so while a creditor would look at this ratio to consider whether or not to loan you money, I look at this ratio from the standpoint of how much stress and strain is a business exposed to, particularly as it relates to cash flow. So here's the thought to keep in mind. As you look at this ratio, if you're above 1, that's a problem. In other words, when you divide total assets into total liabilities, and you're higher than 1, that means that you don't have enough assets available to pay off your debt. In other words, you owe more than your assets are worth. That's an indication that you're going to have a lot of cash outflow obligations. And high cash flow outflow obligations is always a sign of difficulty when things start to go south, i.e. sales start to drop, there's less cash flowing into the business. And so knowing what your debt ratio is helps you have a sense of how tight you need to be on your cash management. So look at it from this standpoint. If you look at your balance sheet, if your liabilities consume the bulk of your assets, that's a problem. When you really have no equity at all, that's serious trouble because it really compromises your ability to put your cash to the best use because you're using it to pay off things that have already been incurred. Particularly if you have a really high current liabilities, that means you're borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, and that's going to show up in this debt ratio. So look at this scenario. This is an actual client, and this is a client that has been really aggressive in paying down their debt. And so if you look at their previous year, they had liabilities of 1.7 million and assets of 3.3 million. So they had a debt ratio of 0.5, which in essence means they have twice as many assets as they have liabilities. That's a healthy place to be. But they want to get rid of more debt. In fact, this client is actually selling off assets that aren't generating income. And so what you see in the plan year is they're going to reduce their total liabilities by about $600,000. And they're going to reduce their assets by about $700,000. So they're actually going to lower their debt ratio because they're doing two things that are really smart. One is they're positioning themselves for an economic downturn by reducing liabilities. The second thing they're doing that's really smart is they're unloading assets while those assets still have some value to capture, particularly if those assets aren't contributing to the top line or the bottom line. So let's look at the math. What's required here? It's really simple. You just need your total liabilities and your total assets off of your balance sheet. In this scenario, we're doing a year-over-year comparison. So we're looking at the previous year and the plan. You have no assumptions, no additional factors. You don't need anything else. And then it's the simple divide assets into liabilities. And so as you can see, last year they were 0.5. This year they're 0.4. And that's because of how much they're dropping in liabilities and assets. That's how you move that ratio down. Now, should an opportunity present itself where they could take on some debt to acquire some assets because there's a terrific opportunity to grow their sales, this business has capacity for additional debt. In fact, they have lenders constantly knocking on their door trying to loan them money. That's the power of a low debt ratio. What I'd like to offer you is as an opportunity to take the business fitness test if you are a business owner that is having a difficult time keeping up with your debt payments. If you're struggling to stay up on your payments to your creditors, you may have a business that's at risk of suffering the equivalent of a heart attack. Take the free business fitness health check by going to businessfitnesscheck.com. Just go to businessfitnesscheck.com to learn what's holding your business back from positioning you with a healthy cash flow. The results are free. Take the test, get some tips on what you can do to improve your profitability and cash flow positions. Again, that URL is businessfitnesscheck.com. This is a particularly important topic as you think about the rising amounts of inflation. It's putting a lot of cost pressure on businesses. And if you're in a business that's sitting with a lot of bad debt, this is the kind of business cycle that can create real havoc for your business. If you have some good debt, then you should have some smooth sailing going forward. But if you're over here, this is an important ratio to look at and to work at managing down. Get that ratio lower than 1 so you have some breathing room to weather what is likely to be some challenging days in the year ahead. Again, the formula is simple. It's total liabilities divided by total assets. Thanks for tuning in to this edition of Mastering the Math of Business with Lauren Young. If you enjoyed the video, likes are appreciated. If you have questions or would like to discuss this in more detail, let us know by clicking on the information option. And then lastly, subscriptions are always welcome. Again, thank you for tuning in.